Mike Dadswell has been thinking about and researching power generation for a long time as a professor at Acadia University. Welcome back, Mike. Fun to chat.
Okay, hi there.
Um, in my research, have come up with some startling things for me anyway, and that is dams have a limited life. They outlive their usefulness. Some of them that ran grist mills 150 years ago have been turned into power generation, but they're not without their complications. What is your view on small, run-of-the-river power generation dams?
Well, they're a problem to migrating fish, largely, unless the proper fish passage facilities are installed. And that means downstream as well as upstream. I mean, we have things like Atlantic salmon and shad and Gaspereau that migrate upstream to spawn, and then we have eels that migrate downstream so they can go to the Sargasso Sea and spawn. So in the upstream direction, you stop them, so you need to fish ladders to get them up above the dam, and in the downstream direction, they have to go through the turbines unless you have facilities to bypass the turbine and get the fish around them. So they're a problem in both directions. And unfortunately, back when they were building the first dams on rivers, the industrialization was more important to everybody than the fish were, because there were so many rivers with fish in. Everybody figured, well, heck, it doesn't matter if we get rid of one river. And we soon found out that that was a bad way to think about it.
And just because humans want the fish to do something and build a ladder or build an alternate route doesn't mean they'll take it, right?
That's exactly true. And a lot of fish won't even use fish ladders. Atlantic sturgeon are one. They won't. You have to have an elevator for them to get them above a dam. So that's.
Now, some people of goodwill who are watching this might say, well, look, everything's a trade-off. We harm some fish, but we get the hydroelectric power. What's your view of the trade-off?
Well, the trade-off might have worked 100 years ago, but now that we've got lots of alternate sources of power, not hydropower, we don't need the hydroelectricity so much. The United States, for one, is ahead of us in terms of removing dams from the river so that they can get the fish populations back. I mean, it was okay when you started out and you had one or two populations that were terminated, but after a while, runs of fish all up the east coast of the United States and into Canada were eliminated. And then you're eliminating a major source of renewable wealth, essentially. You know.
Now, you mentioned dam removal is a new thing in the United States, and I agree with you. I've read about that. It's interesting to read the economic analysis that it is very often cheaper to remove a dam and restore the river than it is to repair the turbines, especially if they're old, or to maintain fish ladders, which sometimes just get swept away in the storm. Do you have a perspective on that?
Yes. Well, the thing is my perspective is that we can replace that power now. I mean, look at Germany. They've managed to replace a huge amount of their power between solar and the wind and the solar power. They're further north than we are, and they're doing great with solar power. So there's no reason why we can't. I mean, all you have to do is set up your system so that it works on the different types of power production and storage. So it's not really a problem.
I'm glad you mentioned solar, because wind, of course, does kill birds and bugs, and that coating on the propellers, if that's what they're called, reduces the generation. And then someone's predicting that by 2050 there will be tens of millions of tons of unrecyclable blades from turbines. Have you encountered that data?
No, I didn't know that the blades were a problem, but I don't see why they're unrecyclable, or, you know, what are they made of?
Well, neither do I, but I guess it involves having to take them apart or something like that. Or maybe that's just a propaganda from people who don't like wind turbines.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
Now, let's take it to one of my favorite spots. I went to UNB and spent a lot of time in St. Andrews and St. Stephen and the St. Croix River, or Scoodic, as it's called by the indigenous people, has probably North America's oldest run-of-the-river plant on it. Have you looked into it?
I haven't really studied it, but I certainly know the history of the fish around it. I mean, the St. Croix used to have one of the biggest populations of Gaspereau or alewife, whatever you want to call them, river herring, in on the east coast of North America. Huge population, and that was largely because of all the lakes that were on the St. Croix River system. Once they were denied access to those lakes, pretty much because they don't like to use fishways either, that was it to that big population. And that's there's a substantial amount of money is removed from the economy when you do that, right? You gain some power, but you lose the other renewable resource. I mean, it's like tidal power. You might gain a little electricity from the tidal power, but you lose a huge amount of renewable resource in terms of the fishery.
Now, that's hard to quantify. You mentioned some value is taken out of the economy. I suppose countless people fish and have a meal or two over the summer, or maybe a dozen, and there is some tourism generated by fishing and by whale watching and what have you. But that's really hard to quantify compared to X number of kilowatts heating Y or powering Y number of homes. That's a tough calculation, isn't it?
It is, but people do, work it out. I mean, there's a fish called striped bass that lives on the east coast of North America, and has an incredible recreational fishery as well as a commercial one. And the recreational fishery is actually worth about 4 times the commercial fishery in terms of bait, lures, people staying in motels where the best fishing is, buying their meals, fishing licenses. It goes on and on and on, and it ends up being a heck of a lot of money.
Now, would you say that calculation again? You're saying the fishing industry is worth 4 times what?
The recreational fishing, in other words, the guys with the rods and the girls with the rods that go to fish for striped bass, are worth more than the commercial fishery, the guys with the nets that go out to catch them to sell in fish stores.
So for people of our age who remember Opie and Sheriff Taylor walking to the fishing pond with their rods over their backs at the beginning of the Andy Griffith Show, that's the kind of thing that is more valuable than a commercial fishing boat?
It is. I mean, take something like Atlantic salmon. Atlantic salmon in a lot of the part of the east coast of North America is considered to be endangered. But where you have good Atlantic salmon fishing rivers, there's a huge industry in terms of recreational fishing for Atlantic salmon. So basically what's happened is the Department of Fisheries in Canada has closed all the commercial fishery in Canada so that it's only a recreational fish. And they've done that because they know that it generates far more dollars into the economy than the commercial fishery ever did.
Mike Dadswell, interesting stuff. Anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I used to live in St. Andrews too, and I used to go to fish for smelt below the dam on the St. Croix, and I always thought it'd be wonderful if they finally removed it. So I'm glad to hear they're going to.
Apparently that's the case. Now, as an old broadcaster, I'm an incorrigible pun maker. If I had an art department and could hang a sign, "Gone Fishing," to end this interview, or if I could wish you happy fishing, I would, but that's probably overdoing it. I'll just say thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, and I'll go fishing.
Bye-bye.